Racist woman tells black student go back to Africa. His response leaves the crowd speechless. Chapter 1. The Ignition of Hate. It was a bright morning at Westwood University, a prestigious institution known for its diverse student body. The campus was alive with the energy of students heading to class, laughter echoing in the courtyards, and intellectual discussions filling the air. Among them was Jamal Carter, a 21-year-old black student majoring in political science. He was well-liked, respected for his intelligence, and admired for his eloquence in debates. Jamal had always been passionate about social justice and had earned a reputation as a thought leader among his peers. He was often seen in the student center engaging in deep conversations about racial inequality, systemic oppression, and the history of African heritage. But today, he was not prepared for the storm that was about to unfold. As Jamal walked across the campus lawn towards his next class, a woman named Karen Whitmore, a notorious racist on campus, stood near a group of students. Karen, a business major from a wealthy family, had always carried an air of superiority. She was known for making subtle racist remarks, but today she decided to take it to another level. Jamal had barely taken a few steps when Karen's voice rang out loud and clear. "Why don't you just go back to Africa if you hate it here so much?" she sneered, crossing her arms. Her voice was laced with contempt, her words slicing through the air like a dagger. A hush fell over the area. Conversations ceased, students turned their heads, and within seconds, all eyes were on Jamal and Karen. A tense silence loomed over the courtyard. Some gasped audibly, others whispered to one another in shock. Nobody had expected her to say something so blatantly racist in the middle of campus. Jamal stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly to face Karen, his expression unreadable. His deep brown eyes met hers, and for a moment he simply stood there, unflinching. The entire campus seemed to hold its breath. Chapter 2. The Calm Before the Storm. Karen smirked, believing she had won. She had expected Jamal to get angry, to lash out, to crumble under her hateful words. But instead Jamal did something completely unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a forced smile or one filled with malice. It was the kind of smile that came from knowing something the other person didn't. A confident, knowing smile that sent chills down Karen's spine. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders and spoke. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in powerful, unwavering truth. "You think go back to Africa is an insult?" he asked, his voice firm yet composed. "You think telling me to return to the land of my ancestors is somehow demeaning?" Karen rolled her eyes, about to speak, but Jamal raised a hand, silencing her before she could even open her mouth. "Let me educate you," he continued, his voice carrying across the crowd. "Africa is the birthplace of civilization. It's where mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and some of the greatest philosophies of the world were born. The richest man in history, Mansa Musa, was African. The first university, Timbuktu's Sankore University, was in Africa. The first human beings walked the earth in Africa. And my ancestors, who were forcibly taken, stripped of their names, their language, and their heritage, still thrived and built this nation with their bare hands." His words hit like a tidal wave. The crowd was silent, hanging on to every syllable. Karen's smirk had faded, replaced by an expression of uncertainty. "You say, go back to Africa like it's an insult," Jamal continued, his voice rising. "But let me tell you something, you wouldn't last a single day in Africa. The resilience, the strength, the brilliance that flows through my veins, it's unmatched, and you are standing here benefiting from the sacrifices my ancestors made while daring to insult me." The students around them erupted into murmurs. Some started clapping, others nodded in agreement. Karen, for the first time, looked flustered. Chapter 3. The Final Blow. Jamal wasn't done yet. He took a step closer, his confidence unwavering. "You want me to go back?" he said, tilting his head. Let me ask you something, Karen. Where are you from? Karen blinked. What? Where are you? From? Jamal repeated, enunciating each word clearly. Karen scoffed. I was born here. And your ancestors? Jamal pressed. Karen hesitated. They were European. Jamal nodded knowingly. So, by your own logic, shouldn't you go back to Europe? Since this land was stolen from indigenous people? The crowd erupted. A wave of laughter, cheers and applause spread through the courtyard. Students began clapping louder, some whistling, others shouting, "Preach!" and "Say it louder for the people in the back." Karen's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came out. She had no argument, no comeback, nothing. Jamal turned to face the crowd. This is our home. This land was built on the backs of my ancestors, and I refuse to let ignorant people rewrite history just to make themselves feel superior. The applause grew louder, and soon people were pulling out their phones, recording the moment. Within hours, the video would go viral, spreading across social media like wildfire. Karen, humiliated beyond words, grabbed her bag and stormed off. But Jamal, he simply smiled, knowing he had not only won the argument, but sparked a conversation that would last for generations. Epilogue: The Aftermath. The video of Jamal's response spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. People praised his composure, his intelligence, and his ability to shut down racism without resorting to anger. Westwood University's administration took notice. Karen was called into the dean's office, where she was formally reprimanded for her actions. She later issued a public apology, but it was clear her reputation was permanently tainted. As for Jamal, he was invited to speak at various events, advocating for racial equality and educating people on the true history of African heritage. His story inspired thousands, proving that words hold power, and knowledge is the ultimate weapon against ignorance. And so the young black student who was told to go back to Africa ended up making history instead.